The 1am curfew will affect clubs, hotels and nightclubs in Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, Port Stephens, Cessnock and Singleton. Hunter branches of the Australian Hotel Association and Clubs New South Wales vehemently oppose the trial.
Because we believe that the members should have the right to attend to their own club and enjoy the facilities without any encumbrance.
Richard Face claims all 5 Hunter councils support the curfew.
But it means you can stay there for as long as you want to till the place closes. Now I think that's a sensible balance, and to trial that for 12 months makes a lot of sense to me.
Those angry over antisocial behaviour say it's long overdue.
Yeah, the hooligans and the crime and the environment that gets around town and when they've been drinking, the young ones.
It really doesn't make much difference. People are going to drink and still go out, and if they want to be, obnoxious, they will be.
Banning takeaway alcohol sales after 10 o'clock, the other initiative.
With my own eyes in Newcastle recently, I saw adults going in and buying alcohol and bringing it out to young people in the street. You say, why do we want to lock it off at 10 o'clock?
And while the Minister claims such measures were successful in Dubbo, many argue Newcastle is a far more sophisticated area and are questioning why sections of Sydney with worse crime problems aren't included in the trial. Some hunter tourism groups, meanwhile, fear a backlash. Vanessa Trezise, NBN News.
The New England Highway at Rutherford once benefited from what seemed like a good idea at the time. Lions Club volunteers cleaned the stretch, but now it's back in the hands of litterbugs. Maitland Council has quit the Adopt a Road program despite continuing public interest. Councillor Peter Garnham disappointed that East Maitland Lions couldn't work on a section of the highway through the suburb.
Yes, there is, and I just wonder how far it's going to go, because we're now saying to people you can't pick up papers on the side of the road.
The Roads and Traffic Authority has withdrawn its support for the program on state roads, worried for the safety of untrained volunteers despite Council's training participants. Councillor Garnham says Maitland Council had no choice but to drop the program for both state and local roads.
Whilst we may not agree with it and may not agree with the common sense, I would hate, with workplace these days, I would hate to send somebody home in a worse condition than they came out.
Newcastle Council will maintain its 10 existing schemes, including 3 on state roads. However, public liability fears have started to take their toll.
We've had a couple of groups that have dropped out, but we're still managing 10, and everyone seems to be very happy with the way that's happening.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Fort Scratchley and her guns have protected the entrance to Newcastle Harbour since 1882. Tomorrow she'll be dedicated to all Australia's servicemen and women.
The fort has been unique, and it's the only fort that ever engaged an enemy surface target during wartime. And I don't believe there's another significant memorial or monument to the ex-servicemen and women of Australia. And I think it's appropriate that Fort Scratchley should be that memorial, that monument.
The Guard of Honour that will welcome Prime Minister Howard tomorrow had a practice run up Scott Street today. The visit will also signal the start of a $4 million federally funded restoration of the landmark. Meantime, Christchurch Cathedral will celebrate 110 years since the laying of its foundation stone. On the day in 1892, the Governor arrived at the site by horse and cart. Today's Governor, Mari Bashir, will arrive on Sunday for the celebration, but it's clear that times have changed.
And we had plans this year to bring her up in a horse and carriage, but as with everybody else, the public liability indemnity insurance was so great that neither the Governor's office nor we could afford to do that this time. So she's coming by her limousine.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
thank God he come along when he did.
Blackned's Bay, Swansea would appear a perfect mooring, ask charter boat operator Brad Miners and long-time local resident Ken Hoff, and the reality is much different. Brad fears ongoing siltation threatens the future of his business and local tourism.
As a business, I can't continue to operate under these conditions. A 2 o'clock start in the middle of winter to make sure that we can operate it's too much to ask of anybody.
The joint state government Lake Macquarie Council program for the waterway saw the area dredged last year, but as Brad Miners showed just after low tide today, the sand is back and now requires a long-term solution.
Surely we can come up with a maintenance schedule or a program that can actually help to maintain this thing. You know, yes, there's always going to be maintenance dredging, but gee, not on this basis.
The dredging removed 8,500 cubic metres of sand, with another 1,000 cubic metres to go later this year. Lake Catchment Coordinator Jeff Jansen says the siltation is being addressed.
Every now and then there's a major dredging work, and that was a fairly major one, but generally for boating access it just needs some minor maintenance on a regular basis.
Back on land, and another Lake Macquarie bone of contention is back before Council tonight. Council is being asked to approve changes to the controversial draft local environment plan and display the revised information for just 4 weeks. Gary Blair, NBN News.
The Panther Group added the Cardiff and Newcastle club Nova sites to an ever-growing portfolio that now numbers 13. It officially unveiled its new look for Newcastle today. Panthers say the two venues will be run autonomously to the Penrith base and confirmed an ongoing relationship with the Newcastle Knights through an increased sponsorship of $70,000.
The only condition I'd like to make is they stop beating us, but I can't do that, I suppose.
The Storm may wish they had a clause like that this weekend. They've never beaten Newcastle at home. Added to that is internal trouble at the club with the sacking of captain Robbie Kearns.
When a side has a little bit of controversy and internal strife, they generally tend to play well the next couple of weeks.
The team to play Melbourne is pending on fitness for all state players, and they'll rejoin the squad for its final training session on Friday. But the bye seems to have been the best thing for everyone.
We're as healthy as we can be given the Wednesday night outcomes.
Clint Newton has until Thursday to prove his fitness, while the news on Ben Kennedy's shoulder injury is encouraging.
We'd be confident that he can resume in, say, 7 or 8 weeks' time.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
$1.3 billion has been allocated to upgrade rural roads in New South Wales, including, of course, the Pacific Highway. But residents of Alstonville on the state's far north coast will be disappointed as there's no funding for a bypass. Instead, $12 million will be spent on the planning and preparation works for the Ballina bypass. $5 million has been allocated to develop a northwest rail link and upgrade lines between Sydney and Newcastle. In health spending, the Hunter Area Health Service has received $28.5 million more than last year, while Kyogle and South Tweed hospitals received funding for redevelopment. And several education facilities in northern New South Wales will be upgraded, including the Hunters Performing Arts High at an initial cost of $4.7 million. So far this long weekend, more than 2,500 drivers have been breath tested as part of Operation Stay Alert, with the number of people caught driving under the influence of alcohol comparable to previous years. That figure presently stands at 29, while police allege one man returned a reading of .290, almost 5 times the legal limit. And officers are particularly concerned about an increase in the number of people detected speeding, 245 for the first 2 days of this long weekend, compared to 177 in the same period last year.
One driver on Friday evening was detected travelling at 120 kilometres an hour in a 60 area through the Pacific Highway at Gateshead. And to cap it off, he was a provisional driver.
But at least police are seeing a reduction in the number of drivers and passengers not wearing seatbelts.
I think this time last year was the first occasion that seatbelts incurred double demerit points for drivers and passengers, and it's having an effect, but there should be still virtually no drivers or passengers not wearing their seatbelts.
Cullen Robinson, NBN News.
After being abandoned because of a local police shortage during the Olympics, Morisset Station was reopened in December 2000 during business hours only. But locals like newsagent Alan Foster will tell you that crime doesn't always happen between 9 and 5.
Having to work here early morning and late evenings, it's quite frightening in lots of instances where there's been lots of cases of people, verbal abuse, personal attack, kicking in windows, things like that, but you don't have no opportunity to call the police.
They come from Toronto, I think, most of the time, and it's too far. It takes at least, 20 minutes or so to drive from Toronto from here.
From Sunday week, police will be based at Morisset around the clock for a 3-month trial.
There'll be 11 police here in total, a sergeant and 10 constables. And each day of a morning at 7 o'clock, at least 2 people will start there, and at 7 o'clock at night, another 2 people will commence.
Superintendent Thompson says the trial has been made possible because of an influx of new recruits.
Yeah, in the last 8 months, we've had an increase of 20 officers, the 10 of those being in the last 2 months, which has now enabled us to put this program into place.
We've had lots of robberies here simply because people know that there's no police within 40, 50 minutes. They can do what they like, come in and go out and do whatever. So it's great news.
Paul Lobb, NBN News. The main road Cliffley property was taped off and declared a contaminated site late this morning. James and Jocelyn Chapman have only recently bought the 9-acre property between Maitland and Kurri Kurri. James was using his holidays to clean up the property when the father of 2 found a variety of chemicals in storage sheds, including a quantity of banned DDT.
It was a big shock to us, really. We found mortar shells as well down there, and a few other things, and they've shut us out of the house now.
Firefighters, kitted up in chemical protection suits and breathing apparatus, collected 30 corroded or leaking containers of chemicals and placed them in hazardous materials storage bins. The chemical clean-up requiring a full-scale response by the fire brigades.
We do have units here from East Maitland and Maitland, and the hazardous materials unit from Newcastle, and we did have to call in some additional hazmat bins from Maitland.
An Army explosives expert from Sydney had to be called in to assess the mortar shells and detonators, which were being stored separately in the shed. The all clear was given when the mortars were found to be inert and posed no danger. The items have now been confiscated by the Army for disposal. Today's incident has prompted the fire brigades to warn residents to be careful if they're unsure about chemicals stored around the home.
But I encourage anyone that does have chemicals, contact their local authorities to get appropriate advice and look at getting them removed.
Gary Blair, NBN News. A meeting with families of crime victims at East Maitland Courthouse provided the backdrop for John Brogden's policy launch. The opposition leader has committed a Liberal National State government, if elected next March, to toughen sentences for serious violent crime.
25-year minimum for first-degree murder, 15-year minimum for second-degree murder, and a 15-year minimum for gang rape.
Among those to hear the promise, Newcastle mother Shirley McHugh, whose son Simon was found murdered near Terralba 10 years ago this month.
Well, if a homicide victim can be thrilled about it, we're really very pleased.
Armed robbery is another serious offence the opposition has identified in its minimum sentence policy, but Mr Brogden wouldn't be drawn on what an appropriate minimum sentence would be.
The recent crime figures show that there's been a massive increase in the number of armed robberies in New South Wales, and I think that we will be looking closely at whether minimum sentences should apply to armed robberies as well.
A petition to State Parliament supporting the opposition policy is now being circulated in the electorate. Gary Blair, NBN News. This prominent High Street location is the base for Centrecare's expansion into the Lower Hunter. The Catholic community and associated welfare services joining together to celebrate the upgrade from outreach location to a permanent presence which will benefit existing clients.
So they've had to come down to Newcastle.
So when this building became available, we were delighted.
Centrecare will offer a range of children's services, including assistance for foster carers, which has been welcomed by carer Therese Douglas.
I think they're absolutely crucial. As a foster carer, I'm learning things about children that I had no idea about, despite the fact I have 4 children of my own.
Counselling and therapy for couples and families also form part of Centrecare's foundation services in Maitland.
Because what we hope to do is sit with the local community and learn from them, learn what the workers in the welfare field in Maitland want of us.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
No Frills airline Virgin Blue is responding to calls from the Hunter and is seriously considering becoming Newcastle Airport's newest tenant. Virgin officials have met with the Lord Mayor and business leaders to discuss the possibility of flights from Newcastle to Brisbane and Melbourne, ruling out a Sydney service as unprofitable. But whatever the outcome, wheels are rolling.
What we've done is come in and said, OK, what is it that you would like to see from Virgin Blue?
Virgin's presence on Qantas routes has already resulted in airfare reductions of up to 50%. However, Virgin management won't be rushed.
Our growth pattern is going to include a number of regional destinations next. There's about 10 to 12 on the radar screen at the moment. Newcastle is one of those, of course.
Newcastle Lord Mayor John Tate says while preliminary talks have been promising, they're just that. The discount airline says before it commits to the region, the community needs to show its support.
The Hunter Business Chamber is right behind Virgin in their ambitions of being here. We need increased competition. I think Qantas at the present time is not really giving us a fair return for the investment that's for the travelling public and the business community, so we're more than happy for them to be here and we'll be encouraging them.
Virgin Blue will now look into the financial viability of the operation before taking talks to the next stage. Stephen Mount, NBN News. The Wyndham Estate Vineyard provided the perfect amphitheatre for Jazz to Shiraz, drawing together the biggest names of Australian jazz. A relaxed crowd enjoyed an afternoon with the likes of James Morrison over the odd glass of red or a cold ale. While some found it a hair-raising experience, others let the music take control. Tomorrow, the festival moves to Horizons Golf Resort at Nelson Bay.
A family holiday at a popular campsite of the Mile Lakes National Park came to a tragic end for 30-year-old Rodney Allen Garn on Boxing Day of 2000. He was killed when a branch of a melaleuca tree came crashing down on him while he was inside his tent. His wife Tracy relived the ordeal today at a coronial inquest into the incident. The barrister representing the Garn family said It wasn't just like any other tree, it was within a designated camping site where people would naturally go. On Boxing Day, they're going to be camping under the shade of a large tree. The coronial inquest is expected to run for the rest of this week. It will hear from a number of witnesses, including campers, tree experts and representatives from the National Parks and Wildlife Service. Daniel Thistleton was one of those witnesses. He was camping several metres from the tree and told the court there were no signs in the area warning about the risk of falling trees. The jury also heard from a tree surgeon who inspected the fallen melaleuca. When questioned if the branches drop without warning, he replied, "There is no real understanding why it happens. It just happens." Meanwhile, the barrister representing the National Parks and Wildlife Service told the court the risk of a tree falling on someone in a national park is about 4 or 5 chances in 10 million. The inquest continues tomorrow. Lyndall Derrick, NBN News.
Newcastle in the 1950s was a world away from the rolling hills of Tuscany, where the play's main character, Danny, views a famous artwork that triggers childhood thoughts.
Madonna del Parto is a painting in Florence, Italy, and we have our young character, Danny, visiting the painting at the top of the play. But as the play progresses, he starts to reminisce about growing up in Mayfield, Newcastle in the 1950s.
The local cast includes Dan Flanagan, David Yarrow and Claire Williams. Their job is to bring the story and Newcastle to life.
We hear about the old Darks Iceworks on Wharf Road, Newcastle, the Newcastle Ocean Baths, where young Danny teaches the new English migrant how to swim in the baths. She's a bit scared about sharks being in the baths, mind you.
The cast has also had 50s dancing lessons to maintain the authenticity of the time. Directed by Arnie Nemi, the play opens tomorrow at Newcastle's Honeysuckle Theatre. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It was a massive limb of a 200-year-old melaleuca tree which killed Rodney Allen Gann in December 2000. This week's coronial inquest was to determine if the fall of the limb could have been predicted.
We didn't want the parks closed. We want them to be used, but safely, obviously.
During 3 days of evidence, solicitors for Mr Gann's family argued his death was predictable, that the tree was hazardous, it wasn't fenced off, and the National Parks and Wildlife Service hadn't implemented any warning signs. But today the jury found that the death was unpredictable. His family agreed, but said that didn't mean it was unpreventable. In a rare move, the jury also handed down 4 recommendations, which include implementing the revised camping strategy for the Marl Lakes National Park immediately, and that tree hazard risk assessments be carried out throughout national parks. The recommendations made by the jury are expected to have wide-ranging repercussions for campers visiting national parks throughout the state. It could lead to a further reduction in designated camping areas and the introduction of compulsory warning signs. While Tracy Gann says not enough has been done since her husband's death, she says she's relieved the recommendations addressed all national parks.
I mean, if this is what it's like in the Marl Lakes, it just astounds me to think of how many people every weekend are in the same risk.
Lyndall Derrick, NBN News.
It was one of those seesawing matches that makes finals football so interesting, and Bega Valley Surge took them ahead midway through the second half. Being a player down doesn't help, and winger Daniel Murphy just made things harder for the visitors, locking it up at 20-all. Charles Croucher's powerful run, though, was the match stealer. Nathaniel Rolls got his Sydney-based community college off to the perfect start against Belmont Christian College in the Opens, and wasn't he happy about it? Anton Croxford fought hard for the home side, but they went down by 4. In schoolboys soccer, Lanthan came from behind to win the Newcastle area final of the Bill Turner Cup, with Ben Ahern levelling it 2-all at half-time. After the break, it was Dale Sheehan who took control, this cracking strike his second for the match and one for the highlight reel. He finished with 3 in the 4-2 win.
"44-year-old Wayne Lavender was having lunch early on the afternoon of October 2 last year when he noticed 4 youths in the grounds of Rainbow Sands at Redhead. Day 4 of his district court trial today heard police evidence in the case, including an interview with crash investigator Acting Sergeant Gerard Lawson about the circumstances surrounding the death of 13-year-old Michael Milne. Lavender has pleaded not guilty to manslaughter and dangerous driving causing the Windale teenager's death. In a videotaped police interview, Lavender said he chased the boys to scare them off because of problems with vandals and people always being on the site. He later agreed with officers that October 2 was the first time that he chased kids into the bushland. Today's proceedings also heard Lavender describe discovering Michael Milne's body after being alerted by a younger boy that he'd lost sight of his friend as they ran from the Hymix employee's front-end loader. "There were trees laying on him. I felt for a pulse. There wasn't one," Lavender told police. The trial continues next week. Gary Blair, NBN News.
It's a little less than 8,000 metres from the top of Mount Sugarloaf to the starting line in West Wallsend, but almost every one of them is up. All divisions race the same route, with a lap of West Wallsend's main street before tackling the mountain. In the Opens, it was a local, Paul Healy, who broke away and led, heading into the main ascent. The pack, though, never too far behind. Institute of Sport rider Phil Talks and Lake Macquarie-based cyclist Glenn Stogino led the pack's hunt. Leading alone, though, is never easy, and Healy could sense the field closing in. With around 3 kilometres left, Healy had been caught, and from there it was all talks. The 22-year-old winning the first ever state hill climb title, but knows his return to European competition will be the real test.
They don't have hills like this. They've got mountains 3 times the size, so we're climbing up, bring it on.
Sydney's Nick Wood and Stogino rounded out the placings, while in the women's, Zoe Southwell held off former Australian champion Natalie Bates. And spare a thought tonight for the 14 8-person teams that are racing in Australia's first ever 24-hour go-kart endurance. Starting just after 1 o'clock this afternoon, the lead karts are expected to clock up around 2,550 laps.
Yeah, they don't have hills like this. They've got mountains 3 times the size.
Justin Norris goes in to win the mystery medley. Hard way to do 200 metres individual medley. You can see Justin Norris, he's spent, he's red all through the shoulders, the big veins in his neck.
It's a scene which fire officers say is becoming all too common. At around midnight, a crew from the Port Stephens Rural Fire Service was returning from a call-out at Mallaboola when they noticed a blaze at the Tanilba Bay Public School. But by then, it was too late. This morning, forensic police searched for clues, while the principal and his teachers searched for answers.
Why would people want to do this to little people?
The arson attack came alongside at least one other, unrelated incident of vandalism. Port Stephens councillor Ron Swan says the area needs more than one police officer.
Local policeman last night was run off his feet here. There was problems all over the area, I'm told, and he did a good job under the circumstances.
Also destroyed was the school's Rocker Stedford gear, ending a campaign which involved hundreds of hours of preparation. Teachers will decide tonight whether to hold composite classes or move senior students to the Tanilba Bay Community Hall. With the school already operating at capacity, last night's fire will see around 60 children without a classroom tomorrow morning. And school principal Lloyd Hogg says the material loss is just the beginning.
You don't appreciate what even a pencil case means to a little person, and they're going to find that all of their prized work, the work they really, really have valued and worked so hard, is now gone and gone forever.
Stephen Mount, NBN News. You don't really expect a course called Outback Diversity to start with a whale-watching cruise off Port Stephens, but when the focus is Australia's many differences, there's probably no better place to begin.
It's very much a very gradual realisation of the changing environments, of the changing landscapes.
26 students are taking part in the 13-day course this year, all mainly from science or geography backgrounds.
I've never really been out west very far. Probably the first I've really been is to Tamworth. That's just to see family, so it's definitely going to give a different perspective.
But it's not just about landscapes. The road trip into the state's northwest and Queensland also looks at industry, Aboriginal culture and rural issues. Inevitably, there's also wildlife, which at least one of the 3 American students taking part is particularly looking forward to.
Oh, I'm a biology major, so I couldn't pick a better continent to come to than Australia. I heard that 94% of all your wildlife is found here and nowhere else on the planet. So,
assessments also have to be completed, although the pass rate could be a problem.
So at the end of last year, we had a few students that said they would actually like to fail so they could come back on this trip again.
We're also looking at the Hahn Premium Spring Stakes being another great race. That's our signature 3-year-old race. It's worth $150,000 this year. And a new sponsor for the Cameron, Hunter Star Motors, will sponsor the Cameron Handicap on the first day, and it's gone to $125,000.
The first to admit his team was beaten by the better side on Sunday, Knights coach Michael Hagan says the job was made more difficult with tough decisions at crucial times. The league's referee boss has agreed.
Peter Louis has informed me that Stephen Clark will be in First Division this week, if that's of any significance.
But it's longer term the coach wants to see things improve for good and suggests that may come with a second on-field official.
To have a referee in each half, so effectively as soon as the ball crosses the halfway line, you would have the provision for one referee to have a chance to recover.
It's his 6 State of Origin players that he hopes will do just that in time to play South Sydney on Saturday night. Matt Parsons, meanwhile, is showing signs he'll also be right after being sidelined last week with a shoulder injury. The stellar season for Anthony Quinn continues, with the young winger agreeing to stay with the club on either a 2 or 3 year deal.
Probably longer the better. It's a great club up here in Newcastle and I just like to stay up at my hometown.
Visiting his town, the Spirit of the Dance, and they passed on some of their tips that even the twinkle-toed winger had trouble keeping up with. The Irish Dance Company returns to Newcastle after 3 years away for a week of performances. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
He was treated at the scene and has been taken to the John Hunter Hospital, where unfortunately he passed away from his injuries.
Right,
A decision by police to stop a suspicious car in bushland off Lomas Lane on the northern outskirts of Cessnock just after 8:30 this morning triggered today's massive police operation.
And in the process of stopping that car, shots were fired and a police officer was wounded.
The officer's female colleague immediately drove the 37-year-old constable to Cessnock Hospital. He's tonight in Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital for surgery on a gunshot wound to the lower body. Senior police say the injury isn't life-threatening. Police swooped and chased the wanted vehicle to a house in Allendale Street, Kersley. Shots were fired during the 10-kilometre pursuit, with one hitting the windscreen of a following police vehicle. A 41-year-old man and a woman wanted over the shooting then holed themselves up in this Kersley home. A 16-year-old youth who walked from the house as police arrived was taken away by officers to help with their investigation. Heavily armed State Protection Police quickly converged on the neighbourhood.
We have members from the State Protection Group from Sydney that were actually on their way up to a job in this area. We also have our own State Protection Group police that were actually based in the Hunter region.
Some residents had to be escorted to safety, others left their homes after hearing gunshots.
Yeah, it was gunshots. I don't know where they were coming from, whether it was coming from the police or from inside the house. You could just hear the guns going off.
Kersley Public School, located on the edge of the police perimeter, was another innocent victim of the siege. Once police had contained the situation, pupils and parents were reunited, ending an anxious few hours.
I'd prefer them to be at home where I know that they are safe.
A long wait then began as police negotiated with the gunman, who is believed to have access to a small cache of weapons. The Hunters rescue helicopter was sent to the area to support ambulance paramedics on the scene. 2 Polair helicopters also arrived carrying senior police. Commissioner Ken Moroney and his deputy Dave Madden went straight to John Hunter Hospital to check on the condition of their wounded officer. Early this evening, police negotiators were continuing to talk with the gunman as they worked to resolve the impasse. Gary Blair, NBN News.
There, he can give me a little bit of stick, but I just, like I said, I tell him it's the luckiest victory I've ever seen, and we'll leave it at that.
Small in size but big on enthusiasm, 18 of the Hunters' smaller schools lined up to contest the second Paul Harrigan Cup, a 7-a-side tournament designed to develop rugby league's junior ranks. The winner goes through to contest the Legends Shield in September against other areas named after one of the game's greats. The Chief today is impressed with the kids as they were with him.
Schools from all over the Hunter Valley come together and the kids are having good fun too. They're layering up and mucking around. There's plenty of that tops happening, so it's a good day.
There was plenty of other league action at Energy Australia Stadium with the finals of the All-Schools Knockout. The games wrap up later tonight with players from primary age to 16 taking part, Hunter Sports Hire contesting all the secondary deciders. And the Hunter rep team has narrowly missed a semi-finals berth at the State Primary Girls Soccer Championships at Spears Point. Needing 3 wins today to advance, the home side managed 2. Gemma Simon among those pushing a claim for selection in a state side to contest the national finals. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
The full-scale police operation was settling in for the long haul last night when there was a breakthrough. 12 hours into the standoff, the woman who had been holed up with the gunman walked from the Kersley home.
No, she seemed to be there of her own accord, and there was no great fears in relation to her safety at the time.
A short time later, State Protection officers discovered the 41-year-old inside with a gunshot wound to the face. He was airlifted to Newcastle but died this morning in John Hunter Hospital, where his victim, Constable John Hassett, continues to recover from the first of several operations for his gunshot wound.
They haven't removed the bullet at this time. They're going to wait for some healing processes to occur before they attempt to do that.
The siege location was then declared a crime scene and an independent investigation team began work on a coroner's report. Inquiries have so far established the gunman was known to police and that a pistol was among the small cache of weapons discovered in the house. The lifting of a police perimeter revealed signs of the gun battle at the home after a lengthy car chase. The allegedly stolen car, which sparked police attention in bushland at Nolkabar, was taken away for ballistic and fingerprint tests. Today also saw help for those affected by the siege and shooting. Pupils and staff of Kersley Public School were given access to 4 counsellors, while police gathered in Cessnock for a debrief and counselling session of their own.
It has been a very traumatic experience for the police, and we all support each other, but we're happy to take on board the extra assistance that we can obtain.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
After almost 2.5 days of deliberation at Newcastle District Court, Judge Ralph Coulihan said he had no option but to discharge the jury after the foreman said it had reached a deadlock and was unable to achieve a unanimous verdict. Judge Coulihan said, "You have obviously given this matter a lot of attention," before ending the week-long trial. 43-year-old Wayne Kelvin Lavender was charged with manslaughter and dangerous driving causing the death of 13-year-old Michael Milne. Michael died from internal injuries after being hit by a front-end loader while playing with friends at a sand mine at Redhead in October last year. Both the accused, Wayne Lavender, and the parents of Michael Milne didn't want to comment on today's outcome. It now means both parties will have to sit through another trial, a date and venue for which will be decided tomorrow, before they can start getting on with their lives. Cullen Robinson, NBN News.
The only question on the Sandpipers' mind at their final training session centred on their captain, Joe Morgan's knee. Sidelined last weekend during a thrilling draw with the ladder leaders, Morgan had to prove her fitness today.
Yeah, the knee feels fine, feels 100%, so it was just a bit of week of rest so I can get back to full strength.
Despite that, it's almost certain backup goal shooter Lara Weller will see plenty of court time, especially after her great game last weekend. Good news for her hometown fan club, which should swell in numbers tonight, with early ticket sales indicating the match will be close to a sellout.
Well, there's actually probably double them coming tonight. They're from my TAFE course, so yeah, they'll be out tonight.
But the always strong Adelaide Thunderbirds have another player in their sights in the talented Nat Avellino.
You know, she'll be our focus tonight without a doubt.
Equal second after dropping 2 of their last 3 games, the Thunderbirds and Australian captain wants to leave Newcastle with the points and doesn't expect a vocal crowd to change that.
I hear the Newcastle crowd are really supportive of the game, so although they won't be following us, we're just happy to have a good crowd, and if they get into it, terrific. It just adds to the atmosphere.